Hey guys, welcome back to Mountain Murders Offbeat.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Okay, I want to begin the episode by saying we have our puppy in the podcast studio because he is very needy and clingy.
Is he a co-host?
He does not, well, I guess he is now. He does not like when mommy and daddy are out of his sight.
No, he loses his mind and he cries and scratches at the door.
Right. So we attempted earlier to record, and by the end of the episode, he's like, you can hear him whimpering and stuff. So we had to let him in. He's being a good boy right now. He's snuggled up beside me. He has his little possum toy.
But if you hear a possum getting slayed,
If you start hearing squeaky noises, just know it's not Dylan's balls.
it's the possum.
It's a Rufus attacking his possum.
Okay.
He loves that fucking possum, by the way.
Well, you have to get that to keep him from biting you.
It's true. Oh, he bit my daughter earlier, and she has like a bloody hand. Did you see that? And he's got these tiny teeth. I don't even know how that's possible.
But they're sharp.
He's like a little megalodon.
Okay.
Okay, like Shark Week or something.
Yeah, so we're going to hopefully keep him contained. If they hear anything strange, it's likely Rufus.
Shark Week's going to come back around in our story today.
Ooh.
Sort of. But before we get started, just wanted to preface, we've got the dog in the room. If you hear some strange noises, that's probably why. Also, I wanted to mention this. Caitlin, one of our patrons, brought this organization to our attention today. It is called the Appalachian Prison Book Project.
That sounds interesting.
It is, Dylan. It is a grassroots, all-volunteer, nonprofit organization that challenges mass incarceration by providing books and education to incarcerated people and creating opportunities for volunteers and community groups to learn more about the legal and prison systems. It is closely affiliated with the West Virginia University, and it provides some internships and service learning opportunities for undergrad students as well as graduate students, law students, and just like encourages some interdisciplinary research. They sponsor lectures, conferences, performances, and educational events related to mass incarceration.
Well, I can solve our mass incarceration problem right now.
What's really neat, Dylan, is it actually grew out of a 2004 graduate course on the history and literature of imprisonment taught by an English professor at WVU. And for the next 2 years, the group of students, faculty, and community members collected books. They raised money and studied the history of prison book projects. And then they moved into like a bigger center and they started mailing their first books.
Wow.
It's really neat, Dylan. So they send books to these incarcerated folks and they accept donations. And it's a time of year when a lot of folks are looking for, ways to give back. How can they get involved kind of in like community service projects, that type of thing. And this is something that could really make a world of difference in someone's life. You got to consider a lot of these inmates and incarcerated folks are in there for nonviolent crimes. They've been in for some years. They're away from their families. Maybe they don't have any contact with their family at all. It's very lonely.
Well, yeah, just the stigma of being in prison, no matter what reason you're there. Especially if you're not some ultra violent person, then I think it happens a lot that people become disconnected from their friends and family.
Well, it's mostly funded by individual donors. They can't do this kind of work without folks like you and me, Dylan. You can help create educational access and provide a donation of, let's say, $50 equals 15 books mailed to incarcerated Appalachians.
I believe I will donate.
Yeah, they appreciate contributions of all sizes, big, small. It goes directly towards supporting their programs, and it is tax deductible. If you'd like some more information about this, visit AppalachianPrisonBookProject.org. You can mail a check to APBP, which is P.O. Box 601, Morgantown, West Virginia, 26507. And they also have a PayPal, where you can donate to the Appalachian Prison Book Project via PayPal.
Nice.
But I encourage folks out there who are looking for some way during the holiday season maybe to give back, or you just feel compelled to maybe do something good for your community. I think this is a great project, and I want us to make a donation, Dylan.
Well, sorry. I think there's a lot of stigma around being in prison. But a lot of times, these are the first time that many people read, try to further their education, try to grow as a person. And so I think a lot of that can do a lot of good. And I personally think reading different books and is a very good way of opening up your mind and maybe viewing things from a different perspective and just growing as an individual.
Well, as they say, knowledge is power.
And I think this is a great program. And I think I personally will dedicate $50 right now, as soon as I get it, and donate it to this very worthy cause.
As soon as you get it.
Oh, I'm going to get it.
You're goofy.
I get out on the corner, girl, get my money.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's great. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks, Caitlin, for suggesting this to us. I definitely wanted to mention it here on the podcast. And hopefully we've got some folks out there who will be interested in helping support this cause. I mean, I think it's important. Dylan, are you ready to get into a mystery today?
I am ready to dive in.
This is something I find very fascinating, and I've heard it covered on a few podcasts, but Mountain Murders we need to dip our toes in the water with it.
Ooh.
This mystery starts on July 26th of 1974, when a young girl, Leslie Metcalf, and her little dog were walking with her parents along the Race Point Dunes, located in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Leslie suddenly noticed that her dog had become excited about something lying on the sand. She paid little attention at first until she saw her dog's persistence and allowed it to move towards this object that it was like so excited about. So you know when dogs catch a scent, they're doing a little sniffy walk. Something gets their attention, they love it.
Oh, I do a sniffy walk.
I bet you do.
I'm at the end of my leash.
I'm like, what are you even doing right now?
I'm at the end of my leash, and I'm just like, oh, please, let me see it. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Leslie quietly followed behind, hoping to find some lost toy or like a weird bug, whatever had piqued her dog's interest. What she saw that day would stay with her for the rest of her life and become an unending mystery that would remain unsolved for decades to come. This teenage girl came across a body lying face down in the sand.
My worst fear.
From afar, Leslie thought it was just a random person who was perhaps sunbathing, but then she noticed the level of decomposition of the body. It was at this point that it occurred to her that this was a dead person. She quickly returned to inform her parents about this discovery, and they in turn called the nearby police station to report the finding.
Well, yeah, your daughter comes back and she's like, hey, my dog found a body, by the way. Yeah.
So that's something you don't expect to find on your summer vacation?
No, me and you were at the beach recently, just a few days ago, and I said to you, this would be a great story great and sensational, if two true crime podcasters were on the beach and a body washed up. So the whole time we're out there in this beautiful beach, quiet beach, we have the whole place to ourselves. All I can think about is, what if a body washed up?
Well, you kind of mentioned this while we were out on the beach at night.
Yup.
When it was very dark, and I had my phone flashlight closely searching for shells because it was like high tide and they were all washing in.
And we were very high.
Well, we're not going to mention that part.
Oh.
And then you were like, what if we found a body right now? And then I got kind of creeped out because I was like, oh my God, what if like a random like foot just floats up right now while I'm trying to like find some seashells?
No, and I also pointed out how creepy the beach is when it's completely dark like that. Because someone could literally be 10 or 15 feet from you, and the way the dunes are in the water, it's like black shadows.
It's darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you've got a serial killer with like some infrared night vision goggles or something.
Yeah.
Like Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
Stalking you.
And he's totally watching you in like infrared.
Well, then, okay, so I have to stop and tell the story. We had this conversation. You mentioned this thing about what if someone's out there watching us. You're already like wigging me out, right?
Sorry.
I'm down on the ground kind of looking at seashells, like all kind of like bent down with my phone. And out of nowhere comes a guy wearing a headlamp.
Yes.
And he was like, can I help you?
And
we
he's
were
walking directly towards
like,
us.
yeah. And you were like, huh? We were both like, oh my God. He thought I had dropped my keys or my phone. Like I'd lost something and was trying to find it.
Yeah, he
So
thought you were looking for something important.
he was trying to help. I mean, he was being very nice.
Right.
But it scared the shit out of me. I was like, thanks a fucking lot, Dylan.
I was like, why is this guy walking straight towards us? Who is he?
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God, then I ate the roach. Remember?
You don't have to tell him everything, Dylan.
And then he walked away and I was like, damn it, man. I had 3 or 4 good hits off that.
Oh my God.
Left.
Enough, Dylan. Back to our story. Okay? Don't have to tell him about eating the roach. Damn it. When the police arrived, they found the body lying face down on a beach towel. She had her face buried into folded jeans and a blue bandana. Her 2 hands had been cut off from the decomposing body. And the left part of her skull was disfigured due to the effect of like a traumatic blow.
So the hands are missing.
Missing hands.
And a severe trauma to the head.
Yes. They estimated that this lady was probably between 21 to 49 years old.
Wow, that's a big estimate.
I know. Standing at around 5'7", and she weighed about 140 pounds. They found out that she had auburn hair, which was pulled back into a ponytail and tied with one of those elastic hair ties that had some gold-colored flecks. She was found lying about 17 feet from the nearest road in the area and had been dead for anywhere between 10 to 21 days, they estimated.
So it sounds like the decomposition was fairly far along in its process.
This is July.
For them to give that big of a window of age even.
Right.
Yeah, so this is not a good scene. This is bad, right?
One other person named Sandra Lee claimed that she'd seen the lady lying there some days before Leslie's discovery. According to her, she'd been too scared to report the incident to police or tell anyone about it. For this reason, the discovery of the body is usually credited to Leslie Metcalf. Further investigation revealed that the lady had an athletic build. She had toenails painted pink. They also discovered that the victim had undergone expensive dental work, somewhere between maybe $7,000 to $10,000 at that time.
Wow.
Only the wealthy could afford the procedure, which was documented as the New York style. So I'm not exactly sure what dental work she had done, but whatever it was, obviously very expensive and was dubbed the New York style.
Yeah, it sounds like extensive bridge work or some kind of reconstructive whatever, something that not everyone would have done.
Her head was found nearly severed from her body, but detectives did not identify any sign of a struggle in the environment around the body. There was no foot marks on the sand, footprints, and all the pine needles under her body were undisturbed when they found her. A medical procedure showed no sign of alcohol or hard drugs. So the autopsy, the toxicology report, it wasn't like she had any kind of drugs in her system. Her death was concluded to be homicide caused by blunt force trauma. And it had left like a jagged crack kind of running across the surface of her skull.
Wow.
Yeah, so pretty brutal.
So it sounds like a very forceful blow to the head or multiple blows to the head.
They found traces of sexual assault, probably committed after her death, by using a wooden object.
Okay, she's been assaulted again with a foreign object.
Yes. Leading away from the dunes were 2 set of footprints that remain unidentified. Later, detectives found tire tracks around the place where the body was discovered. Every car driven out of that vicinity within the past few weeks was checked extensively, but the search led to nothing tangible. The killer had opted to remove some of her teeth and hands to stop the police from ever identifying her. It seemed like they were more interested in preventing the body's identification than its discovery, given how the disposal was treated. I mean, You're living in a very public place, but you're taking the time to remove her hands and some of the teeth.
Yeah, it's already been, seen by multiple people, according to reports. And, so you're not so worried about keeping it totally concealed. Just the fact of when they do find her, they can't identify her.
Many believed it would be easier to catch her killer if the police could only identify the victim. So her dentition and hands were tampered with, obviously to try to conceal who she was. There is also a possibility that the killer had a more than average knowledge of forensic investigation, which made them knowledgeable enough to take these steps and protect their identity. So clearly this is someone like covering their tracks.
Attempting to.
Her corpse was also found in a horrible state because it was July, as I mentioned, which was one of the hottest months in the year, and the heat had sped up the decomp process. Therefore, it kind of like disfigured her face pretty severely. So they couldn't really get a good, recognizable, view of her face.
And this is a beach environment, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
So she was already, like I said, unrecognizable by the time she was discovered. News of the murder confused the people of Provincetown, which is only known as the small thriving town, kind of a beachy town, and crime was pretty rare there. And murder cases were kind of like once in a lifetime, or maybe every 10 years, or it was not like you had random homicides in this place.
Right, it was like a domestic or someone who knew their murderer, kind of family issues or something like that, not just pure random violence, right?
Exactly. James J. Meade was the police chief who was in charge of the case. He vowed to solve this murder within the shortest time possible. He served in that position for over 20 years, following all the leads he could generate, but it led to nothing. He ended up dying in 2011, leaving this case behind. For one thing, Meade was too sure that the attacker had cut off her hands because they knew that the lady maybe had a criminal record that would make it easy for police to identify her. That was his theory. For someone to have access to such information, then they must be quite close to this victim. He was sure that the lady was killed by someone who knew her pretty well. Another detail that perplexed investigators was the neglect of the victim's face. They had wondered why the killer went to such great lengths to remove her hands and teeth to prevent this identification, but they basically left her face open. I mean, obviously, by the time they found the body, it was deteriorated. But
right, but the killer couldn't count on that.
Exactly.
So they didn't smash her face.
They could have she could have been found the day after.
Right.
Right? So they thought that was pretty strange. So they concluded that this lady had no one, she didn't know anybody in the area to identify her. She obviously wasn't from around, she wasn't from around these parts. To aid their investigation, the unidentified woman's skull was taken away for reconstruction and to find her dental records anywhere in the country. They sent samples nationwide to dentists, all over the country, trying to locate the person who had helped her with this New York-style dental procedure. That's a lot of dentists.
Well, yeah. I've never had a permanent family dentist. So I honestly don't think I could be identified by my dental records. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You feel the same, don't you?
Well, I mean, they'd have to probably dig out from the military.
Oh, you were in the military.
My childhood dentist
Yeah.
who's long since retired.
I don't know.
The dentist I've seen as an adult, I think, is retired now too.
I
haven't been to the dentist in a couple years. So
I'm always curious how, unless you do have that family dentist who did, everyone knows, or they can go, oh yeah, I've treated them all their life. How hard it is to actually get a hold of dental records if you don't have that, long relationship with a certain dentist.
I was going to say, though, my mom collects everything, and she still has the molds that they used when they did my braces and my retainer.
Ooh.
The little ceramic or clay molds.
Can we get those?
She still has those. She still has my braces.
I want to put those on.
She has my metal braces in a little envelope.
I want to put those on our oddities shelf.
So weird. Yeah, she keeps everything. So I guess if I was ever murdered and you needed my dental record, you could just ask my mom for those molds or whatever.
Nice.
Okay.
I think I'm going to go forever unidentified if they're counting on my dental records.
Well, the story was featured on numerous dental journals with numbers at the end to contact if anybody had any credible information about this victim. So they've published this in multiple dental journals, publications.
So if you're familiar with this style of work, if this could possibly be, whatever female athletic build, and you're patient, reach out.
None of this generated any tangible leads. Her reconstructed face was eventually circulated to other uh, counties, eventually in the like across the world. It was sent out to other countries. They were trying to match anything they could to like find a missing person she could be. I mean, they were doing everything they could. And you have to remember, this is in the 70s. They weren't as globally connected, but they were taking as many steps as they could to like get word out about this woman's murder.
Yeah, I'm not familiar how advanced their facial reconstruction, just going off the skull was then, but I find that very fascinating. They put all the markers, they get your ethnicity and put these different markers around the skull and then build the clay out and, actually, shape it to the skull and all that. And I find that stuff very fascinating.
Detectives went to major TV stations asking for information, conducting interviews with, reporters, just trying to find anything they could to like reveal this woman's identification. But again, nothing. Provincetown police received numerous calls and tips from people who claimed they had information about the woman or that she was a family member, but there was no match with their family dental records. So even if they thought this could potentially be a loved one, the dental records didn't match. Chief Meade became so desperate to solve this case that he even turned his attention to a local psychic who promised to help him out.
And that is the definition of desperate for an investigator, I would say.
Well, during their interaction, the psychic told him that he could find the hands of the woman buried under a certain building. Chief Meade and his officers tracked this address down, but discovered that the owners had recently constructed a cellar under the house the year before, and they hadn't found any bones there.
So they literally dug out from underneath the house, and nothing was discovered.
Right, a year before, so it was long before this woman was murdered.
So the underneath of the house was gone before the woman was even murdered.
Well, yeah, it was like the year before. It was a previous year.
Okay.
And they hadn't found any bones at that time, and it just didn't match the timeline. I mean, we know how these psychic detectives work. They're usually full of shit.
Oh, I'm foreseeing her hands are in a warm place that's very bright with pulsating lights. I need you to go check out the nightclub.
I mean, we've researched into some of these like psychic detective types. We've never seen a psychic crack any murder investigation, any criminal case. They come in, they give you some crazy story, they send these officers on a wild goose chase. It's just basically a waste of resources. I don't even think law enforcement takes these people seriously nowadays.
More often than not, sometimes they're just trying to be helpful. We've seen those cases. But more often than not, they're after notoriety and fame of some type, and just manipulate the family and loved ones out of money. So, yeah, it's not a good look.
Detectives also went through missing persons reports to see if anything matched this lady's descriptions, but they didn't find anything. Soon enough, it became apparent that this case was going to go cold and that it would remain unsolved for quite some time. In order to show the deceased some respect, she was buried in October of 1974. Her headstone simply stated that she was an unidentified woman, but detectives opted to reserve her skull for further investigation. So she was actually laid to rest without her head.
Well, but it's in the spirit of trying to figure out what happened to her. So that's okay.
It is reported that someone would arrive at the grave and drop flowers at least once a year. Now, this person was never identified, and it kind of became a bit of a mystery in its own right. But, I think in cases like this, there are a lot of folks out there who hear about this, especially in a small town, and they're going to feel compelled to put flowers on a grave.
Well, yeah, this person is unknown. They have no one. So I'm going to be that person that comes and visits them and pays them respect.
Well, a lot of rumors circulated that perhaps her killer was coming around, putting the flowers on the grave, trying to pay some respect, or a person who knew her identity, but that they didn't want to go to police.
Well, I think that would be natural in a situation like in a mystery like this.
But again, I think it was probably just a sympathetic person who wanted to show some love to a woman who'd been brutally murdered for reasons unknown. Possible identities. We're going to talk about at some point during the investigation, police had reason to believe that the unidentified victim was Rory Jean Kessinger, a famous bank robber and drug dealer who had escaped from the Plymouth County Correctional Facility some months before Leslie's discovery. The body was retrieved one more time and DNA samples were collected, but they ended up not matching Kessinger's. In 1987, a potential lead came up in the form of a story of this woman who had been living in Canada who told her friend that she had seen her father strangle and kill a woman almost 15 years earlier.
Oh my God.
This news got to the Provincetown police and they tried to reach the woman to get more information about this claim, but it turned out that she left town before investigators were able to get in touch with her. Efforts to reach her proved, they didn't get anywhere with it.
Futile.
Exactly. And the lead was dropped. Another woman came forward with the claim that she hadn't seen her twin sister since 1974 after moving to Boston to start a job. Her story reached the police chief, and they requested her dental record to see if it matched that of the victim, but it didn't. There are a lot of theories about this woman's identity. We're going to get into some of these, Dylan. One of them is very strange, but kind of interesting.
Oh, wow.
The Jaws theory.
Oh my gosh.
The Jaws theory is possibly the weirdest one that is related to this woman's identity. It has gained widespread popularity because it was proposed by Joe Hill, son of the best-selling author Stephen King. As wild as this theory sounds, Joe was able to fully explain why he thinks that the Lady of the Dunes had something to do with Steven Spielberg's 1975 blockbuster movie Jaws. This theory claims that the lady had been an extra in the film. If you play this movie and you pause it at the 54-minute, 2 seconds mark, a crowd is gathered on the 4th of July celebration, like at the beach scene, and you'll see this female extra with brown hair and a blue bandana. This extra does bear a striking resemblance to the Lady of the Dunes, as she's been dubbed. She looks fit, athletic, as she's been described. Some months before the presentation of this theory, a new and updated sketch of the lady had made rounds once again, as police were trying to rekindle interest in this cold case.
I've heard this theory before, and it's rather compelling, honestly.
Yeah, I'm going to post some photos. If you follow us on Instagram, I'm going to post some photos of the Jaws scene, and you can kind of look at the reconstruction and the sketches of what they proposed this woman looked like, and look at that scene of the movie still or whatever. Very similar. Okay. Now, comparing both faces, like I said, one can see similarities, but it's impossible to ignore the fact that they're pretty generic. There are no features to help one be confident that they're looking at the same person. The movie Jaws was shot about 100 miles south of Provincetown between May and December of 1974. The Lady in the Dunes was discovered in July that year. So Spielberg is, arguably one of the most popular movie directors of all time. And in 1974, he was just a young director with some minor achievements to his name. It is certain that he didn't have the star power to attract movie extras from all over the country. So most of them might have been residents of Provincetown who came around for just the excitement of being in a movie and to earn a few bucks. This suggests that the Lady of the Dunes may have been someone who lived in and around that area. Joe Hill also admitted that his theory wasn't so solid after all. For instance, the lady in the movie can be seen wearing different Wranglers than the one that were found with the victim. Because remember, she wasn't wearing them, but she had them folded under her face.
So is his theory that this is the Lady of the Dunes? She happened to be an extra in this movie,
yes,
and here's video evidence of her.
Yes.
And maybe something happened to her directly after that?
She fell a homicide, yeah.
Okay.
She was attacked afterwards. Also, other ladies can be seen wearing blue bandanas in other scenes throughout the movie because the bandana look, kind of like the do-rag or whatever, was pretty popular at this time.
So even if we were to say tomorrow, yes, that was definitely her, it's still really not going to open this case up, right? I mean, is there a list of extras? Will we be able to track her? I don't guess it really gives us any answers, correct?
Right. And what is most perplexing about this theory is that no one has been able to ascertain the identity of this so-called extra in the blue bandana. So it doesn't seem like they have any list or...
So nobody's come out and said that was me
Right.
in that, because I remember doing that, and that was me. It's not her.
Right. Investigators, because they're really trying to just go with anything they can at this point, reached out to a lot of people who made up the cast and crew on this film set, but no one knew anything about this particular lady. If she was indeed a resident of Provincetown during the movie production, which is possible given the details of the case, then at least someone should have information about her whereabouts or who she was, whatever. Unfortunately, producers didn't keep any kind of record of extras during that era, so her information, whatever it might be, is lost to history.
So it's just as likely to be her as not be her. We just simply don't know, right?
Right. So as far as we know right now, 2 events took place in Provincetown in the summer of 1974, and that's that Spielberg shot what I consider one of the greatest movies of all time.
It was copied many times.
While someone murdered a woman and got away with it.
Yeah. And the second part is sad.
So, of course, this has stirred up a lot of memories from people who lived in the area. Detectives followed this new lead from Joe Hill's theory, but they never really found anything from it. Okay, this is another interesting theory for all of you folks who are into gangsters and organized crime.
Ooh.
James Whitey Bulger. Does that name ring bells, Dylan?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So in the later 1960s and early 1970s, Provincetown was like a safe haven for people in the LGBTQ community. Many bars allowed gay people to come together. They could meet each other, make friends. James Whitey Bulger used to operate in the area around this time as a male escort. He was later arrested for murder, and police discovered he had killed multiple people in the past, making him, I don't know if you'd call it a serial killer or just a mass murderer.
So this is Provincetown, Rhode Island, correct?
Provincetown, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Well, I think a lot of people don't realize, of course you hear about, New York, Chicago, the families, all that, but there's actually a pretty strong mob ties to this area.
To Boston.
To Boston and, yeah.
Rhode Island.
And Rhode Island. Rhode Island in particular.
Providence.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people miss that in their whole, mafia stories.
The Departed.
Yep.
Right? Takes place there.
It does.
Black Mass, the film starring Johnny Depp.
I think that was Johnny as Whitey Bulger, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
so there was
Irish and Italian mafia there.
Certainly a lot of violence and a lot of crime connected to the mob in these areas.
One of Whitey's modus operandi was to remove the teeth of his victims, and he kept this as a trophy for himself.
Well, yeah, it's always a good idea to keep the teeth of your victims around.
The quietness of Provincetown was a perfect place for this dangerous man to dispose of the bodies without any suspicion whatsoever. According to reports gathered by the Boston Globe, many people pictured Whitey around Provincetown at the time of the murder. Now, there is no evidence to tie him to this murder, but he remains a suspect in the case. This theory was bolstered when Sandra Lee, the lady who claimed she'd saw the body first, now an author, said that her family used to visit a campground close to this crime scene. She had seen her grandfather hanging out many times with this suspected killer, Whitey Bulger. According to her, her grandfather returned home one day with a green cotton towel wrapped around his shoulders, similar to the one the lady was found lying on.
Ooh.
Sandra Lee proposed that the lady had been involved in prostitution after arriving from a foreign country into America, precisely Boston. Whitey Bulger was involved in human trafficking, meaning that he imported young girls from European countries to be groomed for these sexual services in the United States. This is nothing new. We still hear about this happening today. It's horrible.
Unfortunately.
After more than 15 years running from authorities, Whitey was finally apprehended in 2016. He was charged for participating in 19 murders. He was sentenced to life in prison. He ended up dying in 2018 with ever mentioning anything about the lady in the dunes or information relating to that case.
Well, and I must say, cutting someone's hands off and pulling any teeth, let alone multiple teeth out of their head, is a fairly extreme measure. And that would fit someone like Whitey Bulger, someone in the lifestyle.
Well, a professional.
Right.
I mean, as police were saying, this is someone who obviously had some knowledge of police work, forensics. They knew fingerprints, dental records. And so the theory that this woman maybe had a criminal record, I mean, it all makes sense.
Or even an immigration record.
When you think about someone like Whitey Bulger, and perhaps, she was, I mean, it makes sense to say perhaps she was a sex worker and this is what happened. I mean, I think it's a more logical explanation.
Yeah, certainly.
Right? Than it's just some random murderer who picked up a hitchhiker and killed her and did these things.
And then cut her hands off and pulled her teeth.
Right. I mean, it's just highly abnormal.
It's irregular from even typical murderer behavior. I mean, really.
Another name that pops up consistently when we talk about the lady in the dunes is Tony Costa. If you're not familiar, Tony Costa was a serial killer who was most active in Truro, which is a town quite close to Provincetown. He operated from 1969 up to May of 1974 when he died. So it is uncertain if he was the one that could have killed this victim, given the time frame between the murder and the body's discovery. Police believe the woman was dead for 3 weeks before at most. So the fact that she was found in July and he died in May, I mean, the time frame doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't.
But, I guess they're just trying to come up with different theories and suspects. Another famous serial killer that's name pops up in this case is Hadden Clark.
Oh, wow.
Hadden was a serial killer who was sentenced to 2 30-year sentences for his crimes. He reportedly confessed to his cellmates that he was the one that killed the lady at the dunes. He told them that he would never reveal her identity to police because they mistreated him while he was in custody. Detectives opted not to take his confession seriously because he had been diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. And I guess had lied and made up stories multiple times. So he just was not a reliable witness or, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. And oftentimes you get these people in jail like that for multiple murders or whatever. And they lie. They claim things they didn't do.
Well, he'd made multiple confessions, had told these very unreliable stories, and there was absolutely no factual evidence to tie him to this murder aside from the fact that he just was claiming he did it. Yeah.
Right.
Over the years, it's become more and more impossible to solve this case since most of the records from that period that could maybe help identify the lady have been lost to time or because of the modernization of information systems. Because at that time, dental records, all of that was paper copied. And so a lot of that has been lost. I mean, for example, your dentist, he retires. It's all paper records. I mean, that shit gets destroyed. They don't enter that into computer systems now.
Well, no.
Records from 50 years ago.
No, typically not. And paper degrades, even if it's being kept up.
So at this point, it would take, a miracle to figure out the victim's identity at this point. And as for the killer, there's a high chance that they are probably dead by now, so we may never know the whole story of what transpired to the lady who found herself in the wrong company and ended up in the dunes.
My God.
I think it's a very interesting story. I mean, I first learned of this with the Joe Hill, Stephen King tie. Right?
Yeah, I think that's when a lot of us were introduced to this story.
But it's very fascinating. And it's just, you would think after all these years, someone would come forward with this person's identity.
Well, and that kind of leans you back towards someone like Bulger, Whitey Bulger, and the type of people he would be associated with. They simply do not talk. The code of silence, if you will.
Well, that's why maybe it makes more sense that she wasn't a natural like she wasn't a natural citizen or wasn't born here,
Well,
that
yeah.
maybe she was from a foreign country. Because it just seems, especially with like all the interesting true crime and the stories kind of made headlines with the Doe Network, all of that. We have all these like web sleuths that someone would have found this woman's identity. Maybe a relative would have come forward. I mean, something.
Well, it makes sense. She's possibly from another country, no friends or family here that know her directly, and there's just no one to speak up for her. And it's a really sad story. If you think of it, here's this poor woman, brutalized, murdered, left, like rubbish on the sand dune there, and just no one ever claimed responsibility. No one was ever held accountable. There was not even family that we know of that mourned her loss. So it really is a sad it's just really a sad story.
Well, another thing I've always kind of wondered about, and I haven't exactly found the answers to, is whether she was like sunbathing and someone creeped up and attacked her.
Oh, wow.
Or was she murdered and then they brought her like to the beach, set it up so that she like appeared to be suntanning
Yeah, interesting.
to see how long it would take before someone noticed it was like a homicide victim? I mean, I don't know. I have questions about this.
Okay, so in this setting, you're in a fairly semi-public place, the beach, right there on the edge where people are. I'm going to guess that's the last place that you cut someone's hands off and extract teeth.
Yeah, that's
So
the other part of
that
it.
leads
Was
me to believe she
murdered
was
someplace else? She was
Yes,
brought here.
that's what I think.
But the way it was positioned, like she had a beach towel, they had these jeans kind of folded like under her face. Like I know when I sunbathe, right, and I'm at the beach or something, if you're laying like flat on a towel, you're laying on a towel, I like to get a t-shirt or something or maybe another towel and kind of put it under your face so that you're not completely flat, right? You want to elevate a little bit.
Yeah.
So it makes me think, okay, so she was there like sunbathing and then she's attacked, but it seems maybe she was killed elsewhere, moved there. I mean, I don't know. I have questions about that.
Yeah, there's a lot going
And
on
I didn't
there.
exactly find out that information. But I think it's a very fascinating case.
Yes, and it's certainly full of mystery and rather sad.
So many theories.
And I simply think that we will never know the answers.
Probably not. And it's also kind of creepy to think of all the serial killers that were seemingly operating in this area at this specific time.
Enough for them, multiple ones, to pop up as possible suspects.
Yeah, or confess to the crime. Anyway, well, thank you for joining us on this week's Offbeat. We'll be back Sunday with a brand new true crime case. No, we were a little late this week getting out our story, but hopefully you've enjoyed this episode.
Yes, you get the double whammy, and we're all caught up now.
Yes, we are, Dylan. So hope everybody has a great week, and we'll be back soon.